Couple whove dated athletes. What was it like? Story 1. Immediate family member dated a pro athlete. He was ranked top 100. After about a year being together he was in the 300s. Lots of pressure from his coach and family to end the relationship. He did, and you could tell he felt bad about it. We check his rankings sometimes and he's never recovered. Always felt bad for them. Story 2. Friends with a girl who married an NBA star. Cheating was constant, known, and accepted as the price she paid for being well taken care of and not having to work. She was very matter-of-fact about it. And it was kind of sad. Apparently it was only allowed on the road, and there was never to be any side chicks in or around the house. Story 3. Does a fitness model count? This was pre-Instagram. She had a fantastic body but was otherwise dull and uninteresting. All she did was work out and complain about how hungry she was. Story 4. Dated a dancer. Was amazing. The crazy was real. I was married to a former D1 softball pitcher. She was crazy intelligent and athletic, but such a most of the time. We lasted over a decade, but I couldn't take the competitive side of her and her inability to let things go. She's also an attorney, so that didn't help in arguments. Story 5. European basketball player. He brought up routinely how he could have been in the NBA if his family had more money resources when he was younger. He was also really proud of himself for not cheating on me, and mad that I wasn't praising him for it. Definitely had body image issues. We had very incompatible life views and goals. Edit okay. One time we were having and he was checking himself out and pointing at his reflection and giving himself a thumbs up. Yes, it was exactly like Patrick Bateman in American Psycho. Story 6. I'm married to an NCAA D1 swimmer who still holds records from her time at school. She's still way into fitness and got me into it too. We get up early every day and hit the gym, and then life is normal otherwise. She's really quite awesome. Story 7. I dated an international swimmer. He was up every morning at 5 to swim, came back to eat, cuddle and sleep, then did the same thing in the afternoon. He was really good at balancing his training and the relationship, which I don't think I fully appreciated in the moment. His shoulders took up like 34 of the bed, which I guess was a blessing and curse. The biggest downside was, no matter how much he showered, everything always smelled a bit like chlorine. Story 8. Married to a tennis player who decided to go to a T14 law school instead of going pro. She also played D1 volleyball. She's gorgeous and still has the body of a bikini model, and she's also hysterically funny, easily the wittiest person I know. She's also a hamburger thief, so like 610 I guess. Story 9. My wife dated an American pro soccer player for a bit. Didn't work out because he was always training. He went to practice all day, then came home and had to run 10 miles on the treadmill every day. She got bored hanging out watching him run on a treadmill for a few hours while he watched soccer games. They led very different lives. Story 10. Dated a retired NHL player for 10 years. His body was completely broken and he was competitive as, good guy, but he died of a massive heart attack at 50 a couple years ago. Story 11. We were both in college. He was on the cross-country team. He always wanted me to go running with him, then would get legitimately pissed off when I was slowing him down. He also always wanted me to sign up with him for these 5K 10K races. He obviously was starting in different categories as like a ranked runner, and I'd start in the later groups with the normal people. After these races there's usually a festival type thing by the finish line. He'd get pissed off at me because he'd have to wait by himself so long for me to finish, but sometimes my group would literally start 20 minutes after his, and he can run the race twice as fast as me, so then I said I didn't want to do the races anymore, and he got mad again because he said I didn't care about his interests. So anyway, that obviously didn't work out. Story 12. Dated and now married to a former low-level professional cyclist. She was so competitive that when it was clear she couldn't keep winning races, she quit entirely and has become a non-athlete since. While she was still cycling, honestly super hot, and she had the most bad legs I'd ever seen. Story 13. My sister got knocked up at 17 by a guy who went on to play 12 years in the NBA. They didn't stay together. He was just about to accept a scholarship and was highly ranked in both high school and college prospect lists. It seemed to be a hookup short fling kind of thing. I have today, he has done right by my sister and his daughter since making bank. He gifted her a bunch of money after he got his NBA signing bonus, and my now 16 years old niece is set up for life. And though my sister went on to finish high school and college and get a good job, she has been able to save basically 100 of her earnings because he kept paying and still pays. Until the daughter is 18, a lot of child support. Daughter knows who her dad is and has met him several times. I don't think SHW knows how Michigan money is sitting in a trust for her though. Sister is now married and has 2 other kids since then. Another friend of mine who I've known for only 4 or 5 years is dating an MLS player. They seem happy. She already has a lucrative career and can work remote, so during the off-season they travel constantly. Story 14. I dated a track star when I was in college. It was pretty normal. I was an athlete too, so our understanding of our schedules was important. But our sports were in different seasons, so it didn't cause any problems. Just the regular always busy with some kind of practice meeting sevens. She ended up transferring to a better school for her sport. We mutually broke up because of distance time. We moved on, still kept in touch. She ended up doing really well at her new school, making the Olympic team last year. I enjoyed being able to cheer her on. I am hoping the best for her future. Story 15. The number of people that associate having a great body with being dumb is staggering. Most of the people I met that I had very good sports performances were smart. Story 16. I dated an Olympic gymnast for a summer. That was great but always super physical. She had more abs than I did. And the convo before and was superficial and always seemed to involve her plans. Instead of learning, 12 years later, I married a professional tango dancer. That was amazing, the relationship was crazy, and the divorce expensive. Story 17. Great body. It looked like it should be sculpted out of marble. It felt weird being with someone that looked exactly like those Instagram models naked. She made me feel inadequate at all endurance tasks. Which was hot. I still have better endurance than most people my age, but it was nothing compared to hers. She was used to working out so frequently that she didn't shower as often as I'd like at first. We got to a spot where she'd shower before bed if she worked out that day. Was great. She had mental health issues, so the frequency varied to up to 7 times in a day to being rejected multiple times a week for 3 months straight. Exhausting. So much running. Story 18. Didn't date, but my father was a multiple-time world champion in his sport. For most of my young childhood he was gone. We would go watch his races, which was fun and also funny to see how big of events they really were versus just going to watch dad play. He retired when I was 7, so I never really knew what he did most of my childhood for work, and now it's just funny to see people lose there when they meet him still 30 years later. Story 19. Dated a gymnast. He was very in the closet because his dad was a member of the EDL. Was great, best head I've ever had, but the fear of being found out was real. Didn't stop him constantly walking past my work when we broke up though, or occasionally still checking up on me, despite him ending things. Takes them 8 minutes to order dinner at a restaurant. Can you cook the tilapia with no butter or oil? Yada yada yada. Story 20. Dated dudes from NHL and NFL. I think there are a lot of people suffering from long-term effects of head injuries out there, and that's all I'll say about that. Edit spelling. Story 21. Kinda sucked. He was fit as but it made cuddling kinda tough. Like I didn't want to lay my head on his chest because it was like laying my head on a rock. Food was also really annoying. He had a very strict diet, and we had to eat food that fit in his diet. He would make desserts that were diet-friendly and they were terrible. Super great guy though, just an adjustment from a more average body. Story 22. Okay, so I was a lineman in high school football, and can put up big numbers in the gym, but in my head I was still just a big fat guy. My weightlifting coach said I have a sleeper build. I have dated 3 women who were in very good shape, a cheerleader, one who was in the Navy, and one who was going to school for kinesiology and nutrition who also danced in clubs part-time for money, all very outgoing with bubbly personalities. Dating very fit and in shape women is extremely stressful, because wherever I go, someone is there to make sure I know she's out of my league and how lucky I am, and other guys are always hitting on them and trying to size me up while we're out trying to have a good time, every time. Grocery shopping, getting coffee, having date night, I feel the stares and the judgment. They all ended up cheating on me too, so, yeah. Then one night I met a shy introverted girl who wanted to leave the party early, and I've been with her for 7 years now. Story 23. Let's go to the cinema tonight. Can't, sorry. Why? I have a half marathon in the afternoon, and post-run diarrhea is no joke. I don't want the real thriller to be me racing to the restroom every 10 minutes. Story 24. Dated an Olympic athlete. Small enough community that saying more than that could dox her and me. Was great for a couple of years. Between back injuries and moving away for training we didn't make it. While we were in the same place it was great because her training and my school schedules lined up well. Her moving away exacerbated her ED and made things much more difficult. She's married now and I sincerely hope she's happy. Story 25. I dated a guard from a University of Kansas. She was super hot, super fit, and terrible in bed. She was generally fun and worked for the Spurs later. Story 26. It was okay for about a month, then I quickly found out we wanted different things in life. Also can't have any deep conversations because he just didn't get it. Story 27. A girl that I worked with was dating a Boston Bruins player. He got a wicked bad concussion in the playoffs one year and it was really hard on her. Other than the injuries it seemed like a great relationship. Story 28. I married a professional rugby player. He played in the International League for the World Cup. His body was 1010 when he was still playing. He's retired now for knee reconstructions. Broken his nose 6 times. I can't even remember how many broken bones he's had over the years. Poor guy walks with a limp now. His body aches a lot. We used to go running every day when we were younger, not anymore. He watches rugby on TV now. He has his beer in his hand. He misses playing sports so much. Must be hard to have such an active youth. Then in your mid-age you can barely walk. Story 29. I dated a kickboxer for a few months. I too have practiced jiu-jitsu and kickboxing since I was 12. I thought it would be better, but she was in it for fitness and more serious reasons like self-defense and eventually have fights. I just needed to burn calories so I could have a 3rd slice of pizza. If I stopped working out I'll balloon up. So it was just different levels of intensity. It was also her only hobby. I'd play the guitar and ride bikes and play video games, and I work out, but all she did was train and think about training and track her macros. Story 30. A very fit cheerleader, no problems. She was very active and so was I runner. It didn't work out for other reasons. Her sport kept her busy, but it felt like she had time for me still. We were always playing soccer or spending time at the beach. Pretty great actually. Of course, if you love deep philosophical conversations that's not the way to go. She was plenty smart, but just as it related to her interests, she liked exercise and learning about how the body works. Story 31. Dated a football player in college for a couple months. His were crusty like they had eczema or something. There was mid and the ego on that guy, yikes. Story 32 First threesome. Two female collegiate speed skaters. They were close friends, praising each other's bodies all night, cemented my love of a defined calf on a woman. Story 33 I was an athlete and dated another athlete same sport. In hindsight I wasted a lot of time because she wasn't mature, we had classes and sports to focus on, but then she would play the victim card, often saying that I never spent time with her. It was often a pain listening to her problems and excuses related to her teammates and coaches, but she wasn't receptive to any sort of solution or growing up. That being said, having someone at all your games and someone that can relate to you is pretty nice. I'm married to a former volleyball player now. She's still really competitive, but that's about the only downside. I gotta talk her down when she loses at things. Story 34 dated an NFL cheerleader. I broke up with her because there's only so many god photos that I can take when we would go out. It was basically like my job as a boyfriend in public was to be her own personal paparazzi. Was great though. Dated a figure skater, big strong thighs, tiny waist, glorious in bed. Story 35 dated a female pro snowboarder for a few months. I was a high-level private snowboard coach at the time. We had somewhat similar lifestyles, but she was always traveling, training, and competing, whereas I was traveling around Colorado coaching, vibing, and riding. It worked because we were passionate about the same thing, but ultimately didn't work out because we were always in different places and hardly ever saw each other. We ended amicably. Story 36 brother is a D1 athlete. All he does is workout practice, sleep and eat. Social outings are rare for him. He'd rather spend his time sleeping resting. Story 37 I dated an amateur bodybuilder and a professional runner. The bodybuilder was pretty cool aside from the farts. My god, the farts, the runner, legitimately probably one of the worst people I have ever met in my life. Egocentric, narcissistic, gaslit me into oblivion, never truthful about what she was doing. Story 38 D1 athlete, dating an Olympic athlete for going on 3 years. She's more driven than I could ever dream of being, and extremely competitive. I think if we did the same sport we would absolutely not be together. The lifestyle discipline, especially around food, is pretty crazy. Most of our shared time outside our kind of shared apartment is working out together, active recovery, or studying. It's hard to work around travel schedules to plan anything more involved. She looks like a Gymshark model, knows a borderline scary amount about mid-century modern architecture, and will backseat game with me while loudly using a Theragun. It's pretty great. Story 39 awful, interest don't align. I'm a nerd, and while I go for walks and do some strength stuff like pull-ups and curls, I can't keep up with a lifestyle. I want a game, watch movies, play MTG, go to museums, long walks, just didn't fit for me. Story 40 I dated a DI field hockey player who was invited to Olympic tryouts. Although she didn't make the national team, I liked her so much that I convinced her to marry me. Several decades of marriage and a couple of kids later, I would say that it turned out okay. Story 41 I was the athlete in the relationship. Years ago, I was dating this beautiful woman. She was smart, funny, very sexy, and we loved all the same music, and when she was away it felt like I didn't know where my wallet was because she was so very important to me. I cheated on her constantly, which ended the relationship. I got depressed, started drinking too much, and impregnated one of the girls I was sleeping with. Life has never been the same. Story 42 dated a female powerlifter, and it was honestly one of the greatest things. She ate about the same calories as my 270-pound self, and we used to play wrestle and lift each other often. Her hobbies were lifting luckily at home and researching lifting. She was smart, very emotional and passionate. However, that was her entire life, which I accepted. We eventually broke up as outside factors began to creep up on us. I am now left with a crippling obsession for strong women. Life was chef's kiss perfection. I train athletes. Don't date one myself. It puts a lot of strain on a relationship. I have witnessed relationships fall apart due to the time the athlete has to put into their sport. It quite often falls apart at that get serious stage when the non-athlete realizes they want before the athlete's sport. You need to be in a relationship with someone very dependent. I have also seen athletes promise their other halves futures that weren't realistic and drag relationships far too deep. Just wait until I make it retire. Story 43 I dated a professional tennis player. It didn't work out, and I admit I was petty about it, trolling her next partner whom she eventually married. Then my rap rival won 5 Grammys for a diss track about me, and my ex-girl danced at his halftime show at the Super Bowl. In summary, don't date professional athletes. They will crip walk at the Super Bowl just to humiliate you. Story 44 in undergrad I briefly dated an Olympic figure skater who was 5 feet tall, extremely thin, and extremely flexible. Was insane. Her life though sucked. Realized early on she had no time for dating. Just. Story 45 champion German swimmer, in the US for school. He was 68 of lean, sinewy muscle and was probably the silliest person I ever met. His gym regimen was pretty unobtrusive. I'm 64, so it was mostly nice getting to be a little spoon for once. Story 46 married to a former track runner turned CNP, is regular, but also fantastic because it's my wife and she is fantastic. She has the track runner cheeks, so that's fantastic to see every day. I would say the itself is no different because she was an athlete. It's only different because of how much I love her. I was with a guy for 3 years who was an elite athlete in a relatively obscure endurance sport, which I had also done in college and am now a coach of. While we were together, he was competitive for making the national team in it, The good part was that we had a lot of shared experience and could bounce things off of each other. I wasn't nearly at his level, but we would work out together to the extent possible, which was nice. Obviously he was super fit. The bad part was that his self-worth and therefore mental health was extremely tied into his results, which made being a supportive partner quite difficult at times, especially when he was dealing with injury. Ultimately, this was one of the factors that led to the end of our relationship. To some extent, it makes sense. When you're dedicating so much of your time and energy towards a goal, obviously you're going to care about the outcomes. But it also wasn't a very healthy way to live, and he wasn't great about seeking any sort of counseling that could potentially have helped. Also, on the day-to-day, training for an endurance sport takes up a ton of time, so it really limited things we could do. We could never really go on trips, even weekend trips or day trips, because he had to train. We could never do anything in the evenings, because he had to get up early in the morning to train. I honestly think that I was extremely understanding, accommodating, but it did get frustrating at times, like when I bought 2 tickets to a concert months in advance because he said he wanted to go, but then had to find someone else to go with when week of he decided he couldn't stay out that late due to his totally routine workout the next day. Story 47, I knew a very cute girl who got invited to a sports star's house, and she said him and his friends were just on their phones and Instagram the whole time. She wasn't about it. Story 48, I married a Colombian volleyball player. In school she studied what roughly translates to zootechnics. This is important because if she wanted to, she could literally emasculate me. She's a 10 and thinks she's average. This forced her to work on her personality. She's very funny and nerdy. We are a good match. This actually makes me a little scared of visiting Colombia with her. If she's average, there must be just, I did no angels walking around these little Colombian mountain towns. Our first date was very hard. She spoke next to no English, and I only spoke a bit of Spanish from studying it in school. I actually minored in Spanish. The downside is that she's also Latina. This means she loves to cook and be a wife. She says it's her job to keep my stomach full and my empty because there's always out there with a sandwich. What also comes with a Latina thing is in public. She's very subservient and loving. At home, she's the boss. She's also very, very jealous. Partly because she's not used to American chivalry, and partly because she's very territorial. We live in the South and she was very angry for 10 minutes after I opened a door for a woman. It was very funny, but also not fun for 10 minutes. Story 49, my fiancée is a former bikini competitor, and played a few semi-professional sports, was an athlete her whole life. Even in her 40s she is slim and muscular and sexy AF. I love exercising with her. Mentally when it comes to food she is way more moderate than me. She likes little samples rather than gluttonous meals. She always advocates for lots of salad and veggies. Story 50, I had a short relationship with a retired MLB player for a brief time. He was really lovely and we had a great time together. Unfortunately at that time he was going through a very contentious custody battle with his ex-wife, and we ended up calling it quits because he wanted to focus 100% of his attention on his son, which I really admired and was supportive of. He was a very sweet man. Story 51, dated a pretty well-ranked CrossFit athlete. She had so many restrictions with her diet keto it limited everything we wanted to do together. It may sound silly, but having pizza or a burger with your so is so underrated. Story 52, for me athlete, here my ex used to say she wished I'd love her as much as martial arts. Well, I trained like 14 a week besides regular occupation, so yeah, that's part of athlete's life. Story 53, she had to go running twice a day come or high water, not even as part of her training, but because of her cornucopia of mental health issues. She really taught me not to idolize women with perfect bodies, because the reality is often years of struggling with eating disorders, insecurity, substance abuse, obsession, and inability to form meaningful relationships due to a lifetime of men simultaneously elevating and denigrating them with the same actions. Story 54, used to date one. She was hot AF, but man, it is so hard to really date someone who's either training or recovering all the time. We didn't even have a good old breakup. BC, both of us were aware she doesn't have more time for her personal life. Both of us were sad yet certain. Told her dating an athlete is dating a workaholic, but they are fit and hot. Story 55, my wife is a powerlifter. She's not pro, but has won gold medals at regional comps. I'm expecting her to pick another gold up tomorrow. She is super intense and focused on her training. I do all I can to give her space to do that. Powerlifters don't usually have the bodies of athletes, so while she's lost a lot of weight, she still has the same body type I've known and loved for 14 years, though she definitely looks different compared to when she started, which I'm not complaining about. It motivates me to stay consistent too. Story 56, welp. Let's just say I'm probably older than the average Redditor, and there was a time that most women had some sort of bush downstairs. In college I dated a soccer player, and when it came down to business there wasn't a single hair anywhere. Absolutely nothing, not even stubble. She was like, you know how terrible it is to run for 90 minutes with a bush or stubble. It's gross. She was fun. Story 57, I guy hooked up with a college basketball player at a premier program. It was dumb but fun as those things go. She's now married to a woman. Story 58, dated two. One competed in Taekwondo internationally. She was a lot of fun. And it was like that scene from Mr. and Mrs. Smith where they're breaking everything in the house. Didn't last long though because of the whole traveling bit. The second one ran track at the professional level. She was in incredible shape and also a lot of fun, but was hyper competitive in everything. She also was a little full of herself because of her prestige in what most would consider a niche sport, like bringing up ESPN footage and spouting off run times when no one asked. Story 59. My ex did long jump for Team GB and athletics at Commonwealth Games. Incredible body, terrible diet, no hobbies outside of the gym, not much of a personality, and was also riddled with OCD for germs. Cleanliness meaning was terrible. She could never mentally switch off. Story 60. Dated a D1 volleyball player. She was super competitive, and I am not. I am very coordinated and a mesomorph, so I could hold my own at just about everything she wanted to do, but man, sometimes I just wanted to do everyday things without seeing who could do them better or faster or more of them. It was exhausting. Story 61. Fling with a rock climber. She had an absolutely incredible body, and boy, let me tell you, she was so tight I honestly thought she might rip my pecker off. Story 62. Dated for a short while a high-ranking tennis player in my country. She was lovely and meant well, but definitely had trauma from the sport and pressure, and it definitely had an impact on everyday life. Story 63. My wife seems to like me 15 years later. Was a collegiate swimmer. Am still generally in shape, but I recently saw a pic of myself when I was at my fittest, and I looked way better than I remember thinking I did in the mirror. Story 64. My partner and I are both avid cyclists. About 200 miles 9-12 hours a week plus some lifting to maintain strength. While we do spend a significant amount of time riding and training, we're both pretty well-rounded. He's an actuary and auto enthusiast, and I'm an artist and attorney. We eat a lot and otherwise just do normal stuff like go out with friends, little trips, nights in, etc. Story 65. I very casually dated a very well-known professional baseball player, and he was insane behind closed doors. Bats hit crazy, mood swings like you wouldn't believe. Never would know it by the reputation he has. Also, he would send me wild videos with his face fully in them. It blew my mind because he didn't know me that well at all, and it would be all over the internet if I ever shared them. Lucky for him, I'd never do that, but some people would. Story 66. Good friend of mine married a hockey player. Really nice guy, but it broke her heart to see him come home after games with such severe bruising. I guess that's something regular folk don't really think about. Story 67. Dated a girl who was on the volleyball team in college. We both did collegiate sports, and more often than not we would have directly after practice. No shower or anything. It was almost primal. We both took the same major, and it was nice to have a partner in crime in almost every aspect of college. We split after I transferred to a different school. Also dated a girl who I ran track with in high school. We pushed each other to be better athletically. Having someone you cared about being present with you at every meet helped me perform better. Story 68. Friend of mine dated few basketball players and said all of them are just big mama's boys. Completely clueless about life and acted like they were still 15. Story 69. Both me and my first GF were international athletes. Apart from her not ever needing a bra, it was all normal. Edit to say we were both obsessed with our sport. Probably 80 of all conversations were about it. Story 70. I know someone who dated an NFL player. They liked each other, a lot, but the constant training traveling was rough for them. I think they still might have feelings for each other, but he's being traded, so perhaps that will finally allow them to move on if that hasn't happened already. Nice guy though, very intelligent and didn't like the fame. He just wanted to play the game and be himself once he was off the field. If he got recognized at a party function, and people started asking him about work, that was his cue to find an excuse to leave. Definitely wish it could have worked out for them because they seemed very happy together. Story 71. Dated a figure skater. She was barely 5 feet and under 100 pounds. You'd think she was the sweetest timid thing, but she scared me. For reference, I'm a 63 weightlifter who does BDSM professionally. This girl was very naturally dominant and borderline aggressive. I think for athletes, everything they do is intense and tightly controlled. Inside and outside of the bedroom is no different. We had a lot of mutual respect, but were way too alike for things to last. She was regimented and sorta cold. Up at 430, ate like a soldier, practiced like a robot, asleep by 9, rinse and repeat. I never met anyone with worse protein farts than me until I met her. Miss her sometimes. Story 72. A family member dated Bison Deli briefly in the late 90s. He took her to the Tyson Holyfield match. Flew the both of us to a bowl game private box, of course, that sort of thing. I think the lifestyle was probably a little too intense for her in the end. We were gobsmacked when we found out what happened to him. Story 73. I dated a chick in Colorado who was on the national team. Skier, rad human, very kind and funny and understanding. Was a great winter in Winter Park, Colorado. I married a 7-year NFL player. College sweetheart. He passed away 10 years ago. Good guy, very much missed. Story 74. I once dated a female collegiate water polo player. She was very sweet and a lot of fun. After we'd been together for a few months, we took a trip to Hawaii, and while out swimming one day, I playfully splashed water at her. I'm a decent-sized man and am comfortable swimming in open water, but as soon as I splashed her, she held me under just long enough for it to stop being funny. It was a long swim back to the beach after that. Story 75. I dated a professional baseball player, pitcher for the big leagues. He was wonderful in every way and absolutely adored me. From the rep that professional athletes have, I truly found one that was a genuinely good guy. I unfortunately wasn't as into him as he was me, and I couldn't fake it just for the lifestyle. He deserved so much more. I wished I could have liked him as much as he did me, not for the money, but because he was great. Story 76. I dated an international figure skating champion. She was a lot of fun, she was hot, but she was insane. Board games or any other type of game activity was nearly impossible. She was so competitive that it made it no fun, and if anyone on her team made a mistake she would go off on them. These people are competitors on another level. Story 77 dated a track and field athlete. Her body was incredible. That was amazing. She's not doing athletics anymore but is still fit as, and it's an absolute pleasure waking up next to her. Story 78 a shit show to be honest. When I met him he was a top prospect, but things were fairly normal unless it was anything to do with his sport. Then he became incredibly famous and things went downhill rapidly. Things ended with lawyers, and my brothers and dad wanting to kill him. Story 79 had played professionally overseas and now works for the National League as well as co-founded a nationally ranked youth program. From a very young age, he dedicated his entire life to the sport and missed out on a lot of social experiences. He's a 67, blonde-haired, blue-eyed handsome guy in his early 30s but doesn't know how to talk to women and had zero game. It ended shortly after it began. Story 80 dated an Olympic soccer player, very distant, only came to me when she needed someone to fawn over her, everything that asked. It lasted about a month and a half. Story 81 crybaby and aggressive. Punched a brick wall once and left a small indent when I told him he wasn't being supportive. He would literally only eat butter pasta and a whole Domino's pizza and like a gallon of milk a day. Every once in a while, he would have a little marinara sauce in his pasta. He was like a giant toddler, no emotional control, very immature, compulsive liar, hyper-fixated on baseball, obviously. Once when I threatened to dump him he sat on the curb in his neighborhood he grew up in and cried and I had to shoo him back into his house. He started stalking me after I dumped him but only for a little bit. LMAO now I think he is a plumber. Story 82 I was a former D1 distance runner, and TBH a lot of us didn't have time to meet people. We were in season and competing on the weekends, fall XC winter indoor and spring outdoor, and then everyone would leave for the summer. I found my wife on Bumble right before I graduated, which was right before the pandemic in 2020. I still don't know how I got so lucky. Story 83 I dated a gymnast who was when she was younger an Olympic medalist and was for a time a household name, great person and super fun to be around, but turned out she was way too into gymnastics for me. Story 84 I played rugby in college and my now wife, then girlfriend, hated it. I was oblivious she was miserable until one conversation I said, man, it'll be really sad when rugby is over, won't you? And she said, no, I won't miss you having to go to bed early on Friday nights, wake up early on Saturday, come home beaten up and drunk in the afternoon, sleep it off until we go out drinking with the team till 4 a.m. and then sleep off the hangover all Sunday. No, I won't miss this. Made me realize how awful I must have been to date during the season.